Hi, I'm Allie Jackson Jolly. I am here with Clarissa Martinez. She is the Vice President of UnidosUS. Clarissa, welcome and thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. It's great to be able to have a chat with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be a big conversation that hopefully a lot of the political figures are paying attention to this year as we head into the presidential election. And that is the importance of the Hispanic Latino vote on this election. So, first, I just want to start by asking you, you talk a lot about what political figures and maybe Americans at large misunderstand about the Latino community as voters. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the first things, of course, is that Hispanics, Latinos, some people say Latinx, we're talking about the same community. We are now the nation's second largest voting age population. So that is what makes it so interesting that even though we are the second largest voting age population, there's still a lot of mistaken assumptions about this electorate. One of them, of course, is people are coming to understand that the Hispanic community is diverse, right? We have folks who have been in this country since before the birth of the United States, other folks who are first generation Americans, and other folks who are legal permanent residents or immigrants yet to be Americans. So, and then from the folks who have hailed from other parts, like frankly, all Americans, right, at different points in their histories, those roots can be, or the roots of their families can be in a variety of different countries. So, yes, we are very diverse. The thing that is very interesting is that also we share with a lot of our fellow Americans that even though we are very diverse, there is a great deal of affinity in the issue priorities and the solutions perspectives that Hispanic voters have, whether they live in Florida or in Texas or in California or North or South. And that is true across different age groups. And I say that because sometimes when people say we're very diverse, what's assumed in that is that we don't have the same views. But again, we actually agree on a lot of the top concerns and also on a lot of the solutions we want to see.
Okay, good. You set me up perfectly for what I wanted to get to the bottom of. What are the big issues that you think really were going to drive the Latino voters to the voting booth this year? What are those issues that there is at least some consensus on that really resonate with this community?
So, Unidos US recently released what is the largest poll of Hispanic voters this cycle. Because we wanted to make sure that we are speaking about what those priorities are, not only from our own experience, but also from the data and the voices of voters themselves. And what we've learned or reconfirmed is that out of the top five priorities, four of those have to do with pocketbook issues. This has been pretty consistent for Latino voters. Look, we are one of the American communities with the largest workforce participation rates, but we still, like many of our fellow Americans, see ourselves in a lot of jobs that don't pay enough, even if you're doing everything right. So things like wages, the cost of healthcare, the cost of housing, and just the overall cost of living are four of the top five concerns for Latinos, right? So if it's cost, again, that all relates to your job is how you bring in money, and then you have all these things. But those are the priorities. The fifth priority in those top five is gun violence, and we saw that become a priority for the first time going into the 22 election, and it has stayed among the top five. But the economy and jobs has been a top priority for Hispanic voters, I would say, for the last 30 years or so.
Yeah, and so let me ask you, so notably, issues around ethnicity, race, equity are not in those top five, which isn't to say that isn't important to this community, but it isn't in those top five that you just mentioned. Can you talk to me about your from your polling? Where do issues, concerns around equity and identity, ethnicity fall, or is this just something that really is not front of mind anymore?
There's different ways to look at things. One of them is on the top priorities, people are very specifically asked, what are the top things that you think our elected leaders should do something about, right? And so those are oftentimes what we are going to think about are the daily, the issues that we're dealing with on a daily base and on a daily basis and that we can see are more actionable. For example, we see that healthcare costs, I think Latinos feel that government has more they can do to make sure that everybody's able to afford healthcare, right? It's not that people don't believe you should pay insurance or other things, but also for many Americans, some of those costs are very high. Similarly, with housing, I think we have a lot of folks who are working and are having to move further and further away from where they work to where they live because of cost of living if they can find affordable housing. So those things are very important. It doesn't mean that other things are unimportant. So for example, right now, during a time that we are alarmingly, I think, for most Americans, seeing that talk about division and stirring up antagonism against one community or another is getting normalized, because we are hearing that even from some of our elected leaders. And so for the Hispanic community, for voters, nearly 80%, I actually think it's more like 88%, believe that it is really important for elected leaders and candidates to denounce white supremacy or hate speech, right? They also believe that one of the most important traits for a presidential candidate is somebody who values the diversity of our country and who can bring people together. So there are different ways in which that interest shows up. And in some ways, because people have also felt that when those rhetorics turn really toxic, people who look different, which sometimes can be Latinos, depending what community we live in, can be can experience really bad treatment. I mean, one of the worst examples of that, perhaps, is the massacre we saw in El Paso, where very toxic rhetoric about Latinos and about immigrants led somebody, a U.S. citizen, to travel across state lines to murder people. And so that is one of the reasons why I think gun violence has also risen on the list of concerns for these voters, because they have seen both the effects of gun violence, whether it is acted upon by individuals who are being influenced by hate and rhetoric that some of our elected officials do, or simply because of the easy proliferation to guns, which is one of the concerns these voters have.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, on top of that, I'm hoping I did hear you say that this community agrees on the top five, 4 and 5 priorities. But can we drill down a bit and talk about what those differences are, or if a politician should think about the difference in regionality may play on things that the Latino community is thinking about this election season? So, for example, what are those differences for, like, say, northeastern versus southwestern based Latino Hispanic Americans?
In some ways, this is no different than what any candidate or politician would do when they are preparing to go talk to a group of their voters, whether it's voters that already support that candidate or politician, or voters that hope to win their, who support they're hoping to win. Um, if the nature, for example, let's take the top one of the top concerns consistently over the years, which is the quality of jobs and the wages those jobs pay. So if you're a candidate who's at a national level going from one state to another, you would do your homework about what are the bulk of jobs and the conditions with those jobs in a particular, let's say that in Arizona compared to Maine, right? So similar here, you know what the top priority is, but that may look slightly different in Miami than it may look in the Rio Grande Valley. So that's just basic, I think, homework that all elected officials and politicians do. That takes us to another challenge that even though this community is the second largest voting age group of Americans, a lot of times parties and candidates have not really done significant outreach to these voters. So either some of these candidates take them for granted, like, of course, they're going to vote for me just because, I guess, and or they'll never vote to me for me, so I'm not going to bother. And so what ends up happening is that a lot of these voters are not hearing enough from the candidates. One, two, because Latinos are a young community, right? Our median age is, I think, at least 10 years younger than for the whole American population. That also means that every year we have a good cohort of people who are turning 18 and becoming eligible to vote. In fact, every year, about 1 million US Latino citizens turn 18 and become eligible to vote. And if we look at 2024, given people who maybe hadn't been part of the electoral process in the past or who are turning 18, we know that one in every four Hispanics who participate in 2024 will be doing so for the first time in a federal election. So if you're a candidate, it's not only that you have a significant number of these voters you haven't talked to, you have at least one in four who are brand new, right? So it's an opportunity to brand yourself or your party, and it's an opportunity to also introduce yourself to these voters. In some
And
ways,
so,
it's not rocket science.
yeah, and so let me ask you this. You talked a bit about taking votes for granted versus earning those votes. Can you tell me what should be done in order to earn those votes? How do you think is the smartest, most strategic way to really get in front of Latino, Hispanic voters and let them know, hey, I'm the candidate for you and I'm going to work hard for you? What is that best way to get that audience and to engage this community?
So I think it's kind of three things, right? Candidates matter, their positions matter, and meaningful outreach is essential. So sometimes you have a candidate who may say, hey, I have a pretty good track record. They should know about it. Uh, I'm not sure that the they should know about it is going to win you the day. The candidate needs to make sure that the voters who support you are trying to win indeed know about it, right? So that's why we say the candidate matters, their positions matter, and the meaningful outreach is essential because you need to make sure that the voters know about it. And the reason I say it's not rocket science is because, frankly, this is what politicians and candidates do with voter segments that who support they're trying to win. That's the same formula they need to apply here. So, yes, they need to make sure that they are visible in these communities, that what they're proposing as solutions for the priority concerns people have, that they can articulate a solution to that is able to connect with those voters. And frankly, right now that the economy is top of mind, not just for Hispanic voters, but frankly for a majority of Americans, I think doing a better job in articulating to voters what is your vision and your solution for those issues is going to be really important for any candidate.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that the Latino Hispanic community is very important to both parties going into this national election. And so I'm very grateful, appreciative for having you on to make us all a little bit smarter about this and understand what the Latino Hispanic community is thinking in terms of this election. Thanks so much, and I hope to keep this conversation moving.
Absolutely. And we have designed a Latino electorate data hub so that people can explore themselves what the priorities for these voters are right now, but also for different years going back to 2006.